Nick has graduated from LBC, and currently he teaches Bible classes at Kazakh Rescue, and in addition to that, he does a few other things as well, such as he does some substitute teaching at Warwick High School, and occasionally does some Uber driving as well. I think you've done more in the past than you do currently, if I'm not mistaken. So he's interacted with many different people in many different arenas. So I'll have a short prayer, and then we will give Nick our time and attention. So let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here at church and to have a week of Winter Bible School. And we just ask that you would guide and lead Nick as he teaches and speaks this week. Just give him much clarity of thought and much calmness as he speaks as well. And I pray that you would help us to be attentive and help us to listen and to learn this week. And I pray these things in Jesus' name, amen. Also, I will tell you that Nick is not planning just to speak to you this week. So some things that are different in addition to having you move forward is that this is Bible school, so this is more of a teaching session, and Nick does have a time of Q&A planned into his session this evening and every evening. All right, so every evening. So what that means for you is you can, first of all, pay attention. If there's things you have questions on, obviously remember them or jot them down. If there's things that you're not sure about what he meant, you can get clarity on that when there's Q&A. Or if you don't think that he said something correctly or you disagree with him, please say so, and we will engage in discussion about that as well. So, thank you for coming, Nick, and the time is yours.
All right, so another note about the format here. I'm from Word of Life Mennonite, and our church is not the most... People aren't jumping up and down to ask questions, but I was at a Bradford Mennonite church. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But there was a few people who would, in the actual talking, I love this, it was great, they would just put up their hand and start speaking when I paused. That is great. That is the best way to do it, because there was one man, I don't remember his name, he put his hand up and said, "I disagree with you." And we had this back and forth for a good 4 minutes, and it was the best experience I've ever had speaking, because he disagreed, and we had the whole audience, the people behind him were shaking their heads, "Oh, you're wrong, you're wrong." Other people were thinking. What is happening live and you're actually thinking about is probably the best experience, at least for the speaker, to know that people are out there. Another thing about the general format, yes, we will have a Q&A. I'm not sure how long I'll go. I'm used to maybe a little bit of a shorter time, but I don't want to overload you. And sometimes I think, like, what difference does speaking about this make? And you might think, this is what are you talking about when you get into some of these things? Well, trust me, we might start somewhere really weird, really far out, what our world believes, but by the end of tonight, we'll be right in the heart of it, and you'll be like, "Oh, I believe in that." And if you don't say that, then we have a problem. Other than that, generally speaking, I think, if I speak about these topics, about thinking, are we a thinking people? Do we like to think about these things? I don't know if you've read the books about apologetics or about, Josh McDowell, those sorts of things. I don't know how familiar you are with those things. So I'm kind of going to try to gauge your interest and knowledge level, because there's a lot of things I don't know about, and of course, and vice versa. So generally, I don't know that many revivals have been started by thinking like topics like that. I sometimes look at the people afterwards, and they say things, and they're really thinking. And one man, fell asleep, and I was like, well, this isn't really a revival. But the thing is, the real point, this is the introduction to the introduction, or the introduction to the first night. Thinking, the conversation starts with thinking when we're talking to non-believers, and then it comes to the heart. So maybe you're not truly excited about it, but once you get this into practice, you'll get to someone's heart, and you truly go, "Oh, I understand," because people don't bare their heart to you, not very often at least. So there's my introduction. Let's see here. So yes, the topic is questions from a world in freefall, and you might say, what do you mean by freefall? What do you mean by, why is the world like that? And I was thinking today, what are we really talking about this week. We have a number of questions. The questions are pretty simple. Where's our world at in reference to truth? Particularly, where do we come from? Origin, meaning, morality, destiny. And finally, some of the things, how do we interact with that? I was thinking long and hard about this. I was like, what are we really talking about on a sort of a secondary level that maybe we can really hone in on? All of these things are sacred. It's like, what? You mean these questions are sacred? Our world has, I would say, run over every sacred thing. Do you agree with that? Shake your head yes if you agree with that. Our world has run over, destroyed, had the pleasure of making everything that is sacred perverse. So you don't go into the Holy of Holies. It's as if our landscape is like a bombed-out city where everything that's sacred, we'll talk about some of these categories, has been ransacked. And I have met a number of people. I'm finishing up a degree at Westchester University, lots of interaction there, also with Uber and public school system. The idea of the sacred is lost, and you say, what does the world care? And the world cares for, I think, they're still searching for one thing at least. Young man, two young men, friends, and this man, young, however old he is, I forgot his name once, and he insulted me with the foulest insult I've ever been insulted with. And other times, he said the most horrible things as jokes, and he thought nothing of it. And I said to him, Brendan, I said, look, you saying that to me, to my face, I would have rather you slapped me across the face. He went, what? I said, that was such a horrible insult. I would have rather you slapped me across the face. That was a while ago. And later, I remember he was, I don't know what, suddenly this weird conversation, or he just came up to me and he said, I know that you care about me and my friend. I know, the word was love. And I was like, how awkward is this? You're just saying this directly to me. It's like, you can go to college, you can hang out with all the fraternity, you can get drunk every night, you can do whatever, you can cheapen sexuality, you can make it so unsacred that you don't even have emotions attached to relationship, which is exactly what his friend had said. I'm not into relationship and love, I'm just in it for the quick hookup. I was like, that is disgusting. That is so disgusting to have that kind of sacred area that God has made. It said, I'm not about that. I'd rather run roughshod over everything. They're like, wow, our world is that way. But when you hold that sacred place in your heart and you respect the sacred categories of our culture and of God's kingdom is what I'm talking about. There's no one on a college campus they're going to run up to the same way they interact with you. Because when you have that sacredness, you hold value that is a million miles away from them, and they know it. Because they know deep down inside there's such a thing as right and wrong, and they have some knowledge that there is a God. There's my introduction. The ideas of origin, where we came from, the ideas of truth, these are all sacred things. I also want to avoid a trap of, sometimes I sit in an audience. I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but I do because I drive a lot. And there's one I listen to every day. The world is ending on that podcast. And then in the end, they'll say something like, one time they said, but this isn't actually going to happen because of X, Y, and Z. I was like, I listened to that whole thing having a miserable time. And oh, by the way, this won't actually happen. This is hypothetical or something. The West, you say, the West is falling. Well, you live an individual life, right? You have a responsibility as an individual to live out your Christian life regardless of whatever's happening. You could say, yeah, things are bad in the West. But you could also say things are rising in the East, so to speak, like the Chinese church and all these churches there are more Christians in church in China on a Sunday morning than there are in America. If I have my statistics correct, I was kind of guessing, I'm gauging like less than 50% attendance for sure in America. All right, well, let us begin, or I'll just keep giving more introduction. Our very first, oh, that's a blank screen. I'm going to put this up. Yes. Freefall. And the thing we're going to talk about tonight, to introduce, I have 2 slides, maybe 3. Hopefully it's something that we can grasp a hold of. I've taken the 2 things, I think, that are most relevant. You could spend your entire life reading about the subject, and you would probably be more confused than anyone else alive, because it is filled with contradiction. Now, let me get started with this. It's a Rubik's Cube, and if you look at this Rubik's Cube, from where I'm standing, I could say this. I see that the cube is orange, right? Okay. You see that the cube is red, or the cube is yellow, or green, or blue, or white. Right. Am I correct in saying I see orange? Is that correct? Pretty basic question, yes. Are you correct in saying you see red? Yes, I see red, or I see orange. That's fine. That's what the postmodernists are saying. You say, what does that matter? You say, I perceive differences, and that's okay, and they're all true. Is that correct? Yes. That is true that I see this. That is true that you see that. Like, okay, so far, that is correct. Now, there comes a time when this postmodern movement, they say something slightly different. I see green. I say the block is green. Is the block green? Right here. Is it only green? Now we have a problem. I've made a statement. All you people out there who think the block is white are over there, and red and blue, and I'm over here with green. I'm very exclusive. The postmodernists come along and say, uh-oh, we have a problem. We have groups. They could start fighting. We could start joining cults, the white cult, the green cult, the yellow religion, whatever you want. We could have certain rituals. We could start our own governments. We could have militaries. Okay. What they're talking about is different ideas, different religions, different political ideas. And the cube, I've heard this from someone or something similar, really helps me understand. You're making an exclusive statement, and that makes people fight. This is what the postmodernists are saying. So they say this. Let's see if you can. I know that everyone is correct. No matter what they say about this cube, they are correct. Because there is no such thing as truth except what? My truth. You're getting closer, yeah? What I know. There is no truth except that there is no truth. There's a contradiction on its face. If I say all of these colors and everyone's right and we're all happy, we're not going to fight, right? No, you have made a statement where you say you can say any kind of statement about this cube, and if you contradict each other, that's okay. But what if someone comes along and says, I don't believe that. I think you are contradicting each other, and I think that's wrong. You can't be in my square. And now we have a group. We have 2 groups. This lesson is called A World Without a Story. And we're going to say that everything postmodernism wants to do is reject what came before it. Can you give me some world events that happened in the 1900s? World War II. What was the problem there? We had groups. We had communists. We had communist Russia. We had Nazism in Germany. We had fascism in Italy. We had democracy in America. And it was an absolute bloodbath, and 50 to 70 million people died. So the problem is what? That there's different groups. They're fighting each other because of different religion, different political things, over land, over all those things. So they say, away with groups. We're all in one group, and everything is true, and we all see things differently. But there's so much wrong with that. And that is the story of the 1900s. You could name a whole bunch. World War I. You could talk about the Cold War. You could talk about Pol Pot and Mao Zedong and all these people who had ideas of communism, ideas of socialism, ideas of democracy. And the problem was they just didn't know that they all could see eye to eye. They actually were seeing the same thing. It doesn't even matter if this cube is here or not. I don't even know if it's here. You could say something, it's just what you see. It doesn't matter actually what is true. There is no cube here. There is no truth, you could say. You're like, what? Okay, now I've lost you. No, hopefully not. You could say this, I see there is a God, you see there is not a God. And it doesn't even matter if there is a God. Actually, how would you ever know there's a God? Because all we can do is see. We can't know. Does that make sense? There's a big difference between saying, I see that, and I know that this is true. You say, I see that there is a God, I don't see that there is a God. I'm just seeing a different part of the cube. The one side is Judaism, the other side is Christianity. Problem is, you can never know that anything's actually there. Like, is there actually a God there? You can't say that for sure, otherwise that might lead to a war. Now, there's so many things wrong with that. I could talk. I'm gonna probably skip a lot of these notes because depending on where we go. So, questions or thoughts? It's a little time. At least such a catch your breath, or me anyway. Yeah, I'm getting to that. And then, yeah, it's good. That bridges into the next thing. The problem with racism is that there are two groups. There's, in the South, Jim Crow laws, like separate bathrooms and water fountains. There are the people who are white. They are the what? We would say, what about those people who are racist? Good or bad? You can respond. Like, from our society's perspective, racism is bad, right? So the white people back then were bad. 100% bad people, bad people. The African Americans, what do you want to say, they were the oppressed. Therefore, they were kind of innocent. That's not how it is. You don't look at people like that. You don't say that a whole group of people is innocent and these are the oppressors. Now, it started out this way. Once upon a time, there were rich people and poor people, and a guy came along and said, all of history is just rich people fighting poor people, and therefore we should start communism. But communism didn't work out that well, so they had to change the terms to, well, there's the oppressor and the oppressed. Have you heard anything in the news about minorities, or there's so many minorities that you could, or all the political identities and everything where someone says, I am oppressed? I don't know how much you tuned into that. That is a very real sort of thing that happens in our world. They would say the Great Depression, everything that's ever happened is because the oppressors oppress the rich, oppress the poor, the whites oppress all other races, the whites are inherently evil. I didn't want to use this example, but I gave a speech to 20 people at Westchester in my class. I got up by accident and started talking, and I said, not by accident, but this I didn't even think was in any way wrong. I said, my point was, in the future, we can't know what we will do morally. Like, you can't say, like, oh, if I had to choose between dying for someone and not dying for someone, I would always die for someone. Because everyone would say, if I asked you, if you had the opportunity to push someone out of the way of an oncoming truck or something and you would die, would you do that? Raise your hand if you would. Very shy. Hopefully you would, but you don't know. And I had my sources there, and I posted them up there, and there were 4 people who were furious with that statement. I was like, what is going on? And my friend, he said they were literally lurching in their seats. They were seething with anger. Like, this is the most severe place you'll ever go, is a college classroom where they talk about this stuff. I was like, what is going on? And suddenly I was attacked. Even the professor came at me, and they were like this. Your sources are from America and Poland, and those people are white. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't see how that matters. And that just made it all the worse. They said, because white people, their point was, are the oppressors. How could you possibly make a statement about morality when you're talking about only white people? And I said, I don't know the breakup of what the different races were in my sources. They said, we don't either, but you're wrong. I walked down back to my seat, and usually everyone claps pretty loudly. Out of the 20 people, 3 people started clapping, and then they stopped. And I look back to that research. I looked through all the studies that had been done on this experiment, and I could never find a place where it said 25% were white, 25%. That is just absolute nonsense. It doesn't, that is a group sort of idea. Okay, so what is the final thing? People aren't grateful if they view everything in that lens, okay? Would you say that modern America is grateful for the peace and security that they have? Are you grateful? In 2023, it's still the best year to be alive, someone said. I was like, okay. Is America grateful for that, or are we tearing ourselves apart? Give me an answer for that one. Yeah, definitely tearing ourselves. We don't have gratitude. We have no frame of reference. We say, I'm oppressed, and you're oppressed. But there are a million ways you can be oppressed. Everyone's oppressed, and everyone's miserable and unhappy and feeling very guilty about themselves. So, congratulations. Major point. All right. I promise you, we're getting to the more practical stuff. We got to lay this foundation for the entire week. Otherwise, we're not quite understanding. This is, in essence, what the people at the top believe in colleges, but then the whole way down it filters through. You can meet a person on the street, and they can contradict themselves 5 times and not have a problem with it. You can have a group of people on an airplane talking about religion that I was a part of. It was really interesting. And this person shares their worldview of religion. I share mine. The person in front of us turns around, and she goes, third eye. Third eye is where it's at. I was like, what is this? What does that even mean? And this... one more example about that. Similar thing, I was sitting in a college classroom, and the question was put out, what religions are represented here? One girl, she went, I'm not trying to be hard on her, but she was postmodern. She didn't know it. She had no idea that she was postmodern. She said, what's it called? Oh, I believe in reincarnation. It's like, you don't remember what religion you are. You have to think about it for 5 seconds to find out what religion you are, but you believe in some Eastern religion that you couldn't even explain. That is very sad. So, here's a simple question. Can you have a neighbor of a different religion? Shake your head or no. Can you live peacefully with a neighbor of a different religion? Say they're Muslim. There's a Muslim in my community. Muslims and Jewish people do not live in that kind of peace. It's the exception where they live side by side, where neighborhoods are integrated. In America, the idea is this. Pluralism. Plural means many, okay? So if we are living in a plural society, let all the different ideas come and let them live peacefully together. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? It's good. It would be better if we only had one idea, which is Christianity, but it doesn't work that way because we live in a fallen world, and there are all sorts of religions. But this idea is generally a good idea because America was founded on the idea, freedom of religion. Anabaptists came to Pennsylvania, William Penn. They had freedom, they had their farms, and they had big families, and they filled the whole place up, and it was great, or I guess so. And there were all sorts of other people, Methodists and German, all sorts of religions that came here, and they lived side by side, and some of them lived in peace. While over in Europe, for hundreds of years, it was like Catholic versus Lutheran, Catholic versus Protestant, and they just fought. That's not pluralism. It's a good thing we can live with our neighbors of a different religion, a different ethnicity. That's a good thing. Now, we have a whole bunch of ideas, a whole bunch of religions, a whole bunch of ethnicities. In New York City, they live, generally speaking, they live at peace. So that's starting in about 1700s, 1600s. That goes the whole way up until the late 1900s, where this sort of thing happens. This is where we really launch. We dive. We take a nosedive off of a cliff. All ideas are equal. I've already said that. The only truth is that everything is equal. That's the same statement as saying nothing is true. Everything is true. It's saying the same thing as nothing is true. All ideas are equal. Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Shinto, Christian Science, all these things, they are equal. All religions are equal. All ideas are equal. Is that true? give me a head nod or no. No, that's not true. Why? If someone says, I see on this cube that living like a Viking in modern America is a good idea, they're not going to stay alive for very long. If they think a life of crime, if they live by the gun, they die by the gun. Those sorts of the things that sort of idea doesn't work because they die, or they suffer, or they can't get along. They say that people who are the most aggressive, the people that want the most power, and want to get to the top, and don't care about anyone else, are the ones who fail. Think about that for a second. The people who want the most power, who are the most aggressive, the most cutthroat in business and politics and all that, and don't care about who they step on to get to the top, those people are quickly unsuccessful. Why? Because if they say, I see I should be at the top, nobody else says that, and everybody else kicks them out. You have to work with each other. So saying these sorts of random and ridiculous ideas that we will talk about throughout this week doesn't work because you can't live with other people. You might not even survive, and you'll live a very miserable life. So, if you don't remember anything from these slides tonight, postmodernism is the idea that all are equal. All ideas. Thoughts? Anyone? Okay, we've moved past what I think is the really heavy, sort of difficult things to kind of think through. So hopefully you can identify, maybe in society, examples of the following things. All right. If we have said that all ideas are equal, if homosexuality and heterosexuality, or gay marriage or traditional marriage, we could say that, are equal, we've said that perversity equals God's picture of Christ in the church, correct? If we said those two things are equal, we've just destroyed the sacred institution of marriage, okay? If we say that a child in the womb is not equal with a child outside the womb, we've just destroyed the sacred part where God said, I knew you in your mother's womb. We have no containers if we do that. What do you mean? What do I mean by containers? These are just different categories, and I'm just going to list a few. I'm not going to go through all of them. Religion, rules. You're a mother, you're a father. You go to work and you do this sort of thing. You belong in this family. Your mom and your dad have lived here your whole life. You belong here. When it's time, when school is over, you go there. On Saturday, you don't go to your mom's house after going to your dad's house. You're not flipped back and forth across the county or the state because your parents are divorced. Okay, that's a container. That's what culture or God's moral standards are. And if we destroy those, we have a serious issue. So, rules are, you are this. Gender, no one really thought about this probably too much. They were very innocent. It's not innocent, it isn't the right word. You are male or female because God said so. And on and on and on. What's the point? I want to share one example that shows, hopefully, the point. The point is, if you have to invent yourself, can you do that? Can you create yourself in your own image? No, because you haven't existed yet. I'm going to create myself in my own image, but I don't even have an image yet. I'm going to look in the mirror, and what do I see? I see nothing because I'm invisible, because I'm looking in the mirror. It's just ridiculous. You've heard the statement probably, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. I'm going to do that. That's probably the motto of our society in a sense. You should find out, be whoever you are, but I don't know who I am. That's the whole point. That's what you find out as you grow up. You find your identity in Christ, and you continue to find yourself in each of these containers. You know your religion, you know what you're supposed to do. And containers for people, they said this, when reality became a burden. Okay, let's break this statement down. Reality, what's real, became a burden. It was oppressing us. It was like a heavy yoke. It's like, we can't live with the idea that sex is for marriage. We can't, and they threw it off. and then they lived in delusion. All of these things are reality, and eventually society, our society, felt the burden of reality and said, no, we don't like the over and above, thou shalt not. We will not do that anymore. Just get rid of it. And I have a sad story that I think proves this very clearly. Whoops. I was outside at the high school as a substitute. I used to do that almost every day of the week. I don't anymore. And I think it was last year, there were 2 or 3 girls throwing a rubber ball against a brick wall. During the pandemic, they got this idea they needed mask breaks outside, and it just kind of kept going, even though they didn't wear masks anymore. And I said to them, ladies, come on in, we're going inside. And she looked at me, she said, we are boys. I was shocked. I was like looking at them, I didn't say anything. I was like, oh, I'm probably in trouble, but nothing happened. We're boys. I was like, no, you're not. You are very confused. And we need to be careful with this issue in particular. The number one symptom, the number one sign, and this is often clear, the number one sign of someone who struggles with, they don't know what their gender is, gender dysphoria, they don't know. Do you know what it is? It's not that they don't know which gender they are, it's that they're severely depressed. I met someone, it was an Uber ride actually during the pandemic, I talked to this individual, and she said, this is a different story, she said, I can't do anything. She was extremely depressed. All she did during the day was get up out of bed, she would make herself some food, she said she would do something online, and she'd go back to bed. She said, I'm so depressed, she was transgender, that I just can't function. There's no reason to function. Because when I get up in the morning, she doesn't even know if she's a male or female. That is depression. And they say that any child who hears who hears gender dysphoria in our public school systems will, whether they don't even think about it or not, they will have this shaky feeling underneath them, and it increases mental illness, even among those who have no problem with it, because they're hearing that you don't know. You can't know. You need to know. You need to know as a child all of these things. You need to know that because it's difficult. You have enough going on. You gotta play, you gotta do this and the other thing, and it's tough as a child because the world is so big, and suddenly you don't even have to just take care of that. You have to do what Winston Churchill said, you have to do God's job if you have to make yourself. If you are a self-made man, that's God's job, he said. You've relieved God of a very important job. That's so true. And I watched this young lady, and some people, they're not faking it, but I don't know that they're really in that category. I don't know. But she is, because I noticed one thing. She doesn't really interact that much with other people. I was in an art room. I need to figure something out, but I don't even know like basic fundamental containers or categories of life. And that is why 40% of those people who are transgender will commit suicide. It's like, it's right there in front of me, and it's like, it's mind-blowing, the number of, it's truly, I do not understand how society, because it's against medicine says it's incredibly dangerous and it will result in lifelong illness, oftentimes heart problems, et cetera. Everyone bought it. Even young people are just buying it. Everyone, it seems, is just bought into it instantly. And it's very sad. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Categories, containers are very important, but if children, teens, and a whole way up to old age, we don't have these things, we are falling at a speed. And it's going to end in disaster. We all know that the wages of sin is death. This is the product of sin, and will lead to more sin, which will eventually lead into death. You know, the world can't see why sexual boundaries would be a good idea, because it's foolishness to them. But they cheapen love, whatever they say, and they've made themselves miserable in the sense of this. They've lost a sense of personality when it comes to relationships, and every person is an object. That's all I'll say on that. Any questions, thoughts? Yeah, so one thing that's very important for those little ones is that they say nonsense, right? They say, I'm going to fly to the moon, Mom, right today. I'm going to get in my box. And I don't know if they truly believe that. But sometimes children say really nonsensical things, right? But instead, if we encourage that nonsense, that becomes a serious problem. In these two here, gender and sexual, whatever, they're saying this to people. Young girls, they say, are you uncomfortable growing up, how you feel in your own body? And they all say, yes, then you might be a boy. And they spout that nonsense at 12 years old to their parents. And if their parents don't respond the correct way, there could be a serious issue, or there could be a problem, depending on where you live. As far as religion, that's what we're talking about this week. Even if you would believe in Judaism, there's value there versus postmodernism. I don't know about Islam. You can't really equate, like, having nothing. Maybe you'll fall to your senses. But in a very short term, growing up in a strict sort of Muslim household, well, I'm not saying Sharia law, that would have some benefit in saying, Mommy and Daddy know what's going on. There's a God in heaven. We came from here. We're going to. If the mother, very much so in Islam, is submissive to the husband, and there's sort of this kind of working order, so to speak. You know, they may not be Christians, but sort of a working order where everyone has their role. It's dad makes maybe the top decision. Mom is very smart, and she also helps make decisions, and the children are down here. You know, there's a book. It's called "There's No Such Thing as Naughty." Have you ever heard that book? I don't know. It was on. I think it was someone was talking about it, and they said, "There's no such thing as naughty. I have children. I'd like to buy that book. I would like to feed every page to the author." It's like, that is true. There is a thing as. Can you admit that there is such a thing as naughty? Yes, there's such a thing as naughty. But there's also people who are very foolish and who back off, where children suddenly just elevate. They have no responsibility. And if they don't have the proper role of authority, that is a serious issue. And I think that some of the craziness that young men do in our cities and societies, we all know this, is because they don't have a father, right? We say that, because they don't have a heavenly father. I talked to someone, they said, my dad's doesn't agree with me. He argues with me. We clash all the time. We clash and we clash and we clash. I said, well, he was this is a big deal. I was like, yes. But let's start at the beginning. You still are bumping up against someone that tells you who you are. Like, you're the son, you're down here, I'm in charge. It's so much better than a child who's told all these nonsense, and it has free reign of the house, and no one's at home, and they become sexually involved at age 13 or something. So that's what I thought of as roles. Not sure I can think of too many others there. So we are going along. Here's one more thought on this slide. Have you ever felt self-conscious? You got some crumbs on your shirt there. Do you feel self-conscious? Yeah. Someone told me your button isn't buttoned. And I immediately was like, oh no, and felt self-conscious. You have that as like an instinct because you don't want to have like food on your face when you go to church or something. But the problem is, we have a society that has none of these, no identity, but is constantly feeling self-conscious. You may say, how are people feeling? How many of you know what Snapchat is? Snapchat? Okay. Twitter, you know what that is. Children, youth don't use that. How many of you know what TikTok is? How many of you know what BeReal is? Oh, right, wow. I can say these things, and I know these things. I work in a public high school. But all these things, mister, will you take my BeReal? Absolutely not. That is the most self-conscious thing you can ever have in your life. I would be terrified to have BeReal. And the way I understand it, students suddenly go, oh, my BeReal. And it just comes on. They have to film whatever they're doing. I don't know if they have a certain time span. Talk about self-consciousness and anxiety. I'm sitting there watching my phone. What if I'm doing something embarrassing? What if I am driving? Or you can think of a million things. And that's me as a guy. But then women, Instagram, you can't even go home from school. Like, probably when you grew up, you would go older people, you would go home from school and your friends couldn't get you there, right? Unless they called you on the phone. Not get you, but you know what I'm saying. Like, you didn't have to feel like worried, like, oh no, what are my friends thinking? Is my hair, I don't know what you thought. Now it's not like that. Every ping and every 10 seconds or so, there could be another post on Instagram that glorifies a sense of beauty through filters and through all sorts of technology that is not healthy at all. And like, they did a government study and said, oh, Instagram is not healthy for young teenage girls. And the senator went, well, no, duh. We already knew that. Why would you even bother asking that question? It's terrible for people, and it's particularly young girls. So, self-consciousness. I was standing, one final thought on self-consciousness. I was standing in the back of the room, and I noticed this guy. Every 5 minutes, he'd pull out his phone, and he'd turn the camera on. Look at his hair. I don't know if you guys do that. Look at his hair. I stood there for 10 minutes. He did it twice. And I thought, well, I know that young lady over there talks to him, so maybe that's the thing here. But they all do that. Guys and girls, they pull it out. They got to check themselves, make sure they look just perfect. I was like, I didn't do that. I saw my face twice a day when I was in high school, or I don't know how many times. That is severe self-consciousness. And if you are always self-conscious, you are always miserable. That's what psychologist said, Jordan Peterson. If you're always self-conscious, you are going to end up miserable. So we have this, we have no identity, but more than ever, you have to know who you are because everyone's taking pictures of you, everyone's snapping you, it's TikTok and everything. You better know who you are, but we have no idea. And it builds this sort of anxiety and depression we'll talk about on another night. Confused?
Yes. Would you recommend that approach? Telling them that there is no rules or your rules? Perhaps not fulfilling their roles, in other words, to let them just do whatever they want.
You're saying a child, or are you saying someone who's gender confused? Any of them? Well, you can show a lot. I think it's unhealthy, but there are young men who will cling to you in a public high school, not cling, but it's a little much how much they show that they need some attention. It's way too much. It's obvious. It's in your face. Literally, they're yelling in your face almost. Listen to me. Literally, there's a kid twice. I walked past him by accident, and I didn't look at him. I just kind of snuck by the row, and he goes, look at me. I was like, what? He didn't have a father. His father died. And I felt, it's terrible, but he said the same thing again. I walked past, and he said, why are you ignoring me? I was like, you are one very troubled young man, and I know far too much, it seems, about his life, and he talks, but you can be a role, you can fulfill a role, but you have to be careful with particularly gender confusion. I wouldn't recommend it in public high school because you would be fired within 10 seconds. But I did talk to one person who was kind of in that sphere of thought, who experienced some of that. And they kept asking me, and this is the tricky part. I listened. I heard her story. I heard how she was kicked out of her parents' house because of whatever reason. I didn't jump into a sudden explanation of the gospel. I listened. She talked, and she was grateful for someone to listen. I showed genuine interest. But in the end, when that's the first time you're hearing or listening to or talking to a Christian like that, are you ready to hear the truth bluntly? You first need to experience love and care and genuine interest. And if you've heard of Rosaria Butterfield, I can't get the book out. She's on YouTube. She's great. She said she went to a pastor's house every day, or every Sunday after lunch they would read the Bible. She didn't really know why she was doing it, I think was the idea, and she just kept reading. They never said anything about sexuality. She was a homosexual. Say anything about that. Just kept reading the Bible with her. They demonstrated love and hospitality, which was key for her, and eventually she came to the truth. But it was a long path. And the problem was with this young lady I was talking to, she said, what do you think? And have you ever been, I don't know if you've seen it on a clip or something, someone is baited. They draw you in, and then they want to snap on you. They want to just, like the mousetrap, want to get you. So what do you think? What do you think? Kind of like that, antagonistic a little bit. What do you think? I said, I believe the Bible. She said, well, what does the Bible say? I said, well, why don't you check out this resource or whatever. She's like, well, what do you think? What do you think the Bible thinks? And I said, well, God thinks it's wrong and not something. And she said the most profane things I've ever heard. She left, and she was so angry. And I felt horrible. Because people who aren't ready to hear the truth maybe just need love. I don't know exactly all the answers, but I do know you have to demonstrate love, and you have to demonstrate a lot of grace, because who knows the situation. That kind of gets your question? Yeah, we have about just a few minutes yet, and this is my last slide I'll show. I'll pick up the next one tomorrow night. If you have any questions, it's a great time. Obviously, talking about listening, and there are two ways of evangelizing, at least. One is, hello, sir, what is your name? Hi, Mark, how are you? Did you know that Jesus Christ came to die for your sins, and if you accept him into your heart, you'll go to heaven forever? Would you like to do that right now? I have a card for you to read. Or, your judgment is coming, says Isaiah, and you better repent of your sin, you evil sinner. It's kind of the same thing. Or do you believe in God? Well, you should believe in God because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 reasons. Oh, you don't believe in God? I don't have any more questions. The other way is, which is like very simple, is just to listen. I've had people in Uber rides, I've listened for 20 minutes straight, and they don't come up for air because no one ever talks to them. No one cares about their cats. No one cares about their visions of the Lord or something that this woman had. And no one cares about their drug addiction. No one cares that they have cancer. No one seems to care that they struggled with suicidal thoughts. No one seems to care that they're freaking out, he said, because my Orthodox Greek religion, it just doesn't work for me, and I was arrested, and he was so out of sorts. But he calmed down, you listen to him, you listen, and you show interest, and eventually that man wrote down what I said to him after that. Because I had listened, he was like cued in. He wrote down, I said, why aren't you paying attention? He said, I'm writing it down. I was like, ooh, this is really heavy stuff, but it's not me. So, number one, listen. You can practice this. There are a ton of people who want someone to listen. And everyone has a story. That's the thing. Postmodern people, according to the scholars, one thing they want to hear, a story, and they want to share their story. Yet underneath all of that in our modern world, they said there is no story. It's kind of funny. Any more questions? More questions? All right, well, I think this is a good play. I'm going to play a video that's about a minute long. And someone asked me this, like, I never thought about, like, what life means. You didn't really have to because you were taught so much since you were a child. It was implicit, like it was there and you just kind of fighting. In any part of the world, that is becoming more. In the East, it's the same idea. Buddhism and Hinduism, they have some of the same very core ideas. If you can just picture that person, how are they supposed to, quote unquote, make it in the world? And we wonder, we go, why on earth are people committing crimes and why are people acting like that? And it's no wonder if you don't have anything to stand on, you're in free fall. You don't know God. You might know of him, about him, but there's no one showing you any love. And to bring it back to the first point, the most sacred thing is our relationship with God, but the next sacred thing is our relationship with our neighbor. If people never feel that love, unconditional, I don't know if they can truly ever understand or easily understand who God is. All right, so we'll just play this last little clip that sums up.
When horrible things happen, when horrible things happen to me, or I feel or I read some terrible thing going on in the world, yes, those are tragedies going on in the world, my response is, nothing matters. It's all empty and meaningless. This is how the world is. Get used to it.
Last year, the #1 motion picture in the United States, and I suppose throughout the world, that drew the largest box office, was a motion picture that was made just for a small amount of money. Nobody ever thought it would amount to much. It was based upon a simple little story, and it was called Love Story. And then last year, the Duke of Windsor died, and a headline in the British papers said, the greatest love story of the century. But the greatest love story of all time is summed up in these 25 verses of 25 words that someone has called a miniature Bible. The gospel in a nutshell. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. The greatest love story ever told.
All right. Well, thank you, Nick, for speaking this evening. We do have about 2 minutes left. Any comments or questions from anybody before we close here this evening?